name is Shikha Pathak, and I am the Manager Awareness and Skill Building at SciSec. Welcome to today's webinar. This webinar is a part of SciSec weekly series titled Samgachatvam. May we all progress together. The objective of these webinars is to cover cybersecurity topics and provide conceptual overview of the same. Let us start first by going through some ground rules. All attendees of the webinar have to keep their mics on mute by default. We will have a question and answer round at the end of the presentation. In case you have any questions, please share them on the chat window and we will take them in the end. We will be recording this webinar and the recording will be uploaded on SciSec's YouTube channel. So ensure that your mics are off so that there is no disturbance created either for the recording or for the speakers. This is the 21st webinar and the topic today is identity and access management. We can move to the next slide. The topic today is identity and access management. I'm sure that you will find this series of webinar very useful. In the next slide, we'll be talking about the upcoming webinar that is next week. We will be sharing details of all these webinars on our social media channels, so stay tuned. If you haven't followed us, do follow us on Twitter @SciSecCoE. In the orange, you can see all the upcoming webinars for this month. So do follow us and register timely for all these webinars. Next slide. As usual, we'll be having an assessment after this webinar, which will be kept open for 60 minutes. The assessment questions will be very much from the topics which are already covered in this webinar. So listen carefully. Those who will get 11 or more marks, correct answers out of total 15 questions, will be provided with a certificate of achievement. Those who are unable to take the assessment will be given a certificate of participation. At the end of this assessment, you will also be asked to provide feedback. Please provide your genuine feedback and be assured that it will have no bearing on your assessment. Please ensure that the details you provide are clearly written while taking the assessment, as a certificate will be generated basis these details only. At the end of the webinar, we will be sharing the link of the assessment in the Q&A chat session. So please ensure that it is open only for those who have participated in this webinar. Let me now move to the next slide. I will take this opportunity to introduce the speakers for today's webinar on the topic Identity and Access Management. We are pleased to have with us Mr. Pankaj Joshi. Mr. Pankaj is the director at Deloitte and leads the Identity and Access Management practice. He has over 20 years of IT experience and specializes in delivering cyber risk solutions using identity and access management. Pankaj has delivered multiple complex global IAM strategies, implementation, and application management services across industries and vendor technologies. Welcome, Pankaj. We also have with us Mr. Ravindra. He is an associate director at Deloitte with over 18 years of IT experience. He specializes in managing, designing, and implementing IAM solutions and has assisted global clients across industries in their IAM initiatives. We welcome both of you, and I'm sure the participants will find these series of webinars very knowledgeable and helpful. I will now hand over to Mr. Pankaj Joshi for the next part of this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Pathak. Hello, everyone. We will be today talking about identity and access management. I hope my volume levels are fine, Karthik.
Yes,
yes, Pankaj. I will be able to hear you well.
Yeah, and the screen Ravi has shared should also be on your screen.
It's visible, yeah.
All right. Thank you for the introductions. It's a very good name Sangachvatam, right, reminds me of my school days when our morning prayer used to be a Veda Prarthana, Sangachadam, Sangvadatam. So, great name to choose to take everybody together, right? We will talk about digital identity and access management, a topic very relevant in the current scenario, especially when we see a lot of digital movement happening in India, right? All the payment instruments that you see, right? Prepaid, whether it is Paytm or Airtel or something else, right? That is a digital movement that has happened through Government of India initiatives. Apart from that, you see a lot of other government initiatives which have gone digital, right? Right from requesting your license to ration cards to subsidies or and many other things, right? Now, on all of these things, what is important is identity of the user, how it is managed um, by the handling agency, right? It could be government or a private agency like a telecom operator, or when you book a courier, or when you go to a bank, right? All of us now probably have a Aadhaar number, and that is your identity in some sense as well. Now, if you look at this sense of identity, right, you are there everywhere in digital. If you look at this picture, banking, perhaps most of us have multiple banking relationships. And if you look at even one bank, you probably first most have a savings account. The individuals who run business have current account. Then there are credit cards, loans, investment relationships. You do demat or stock trading. With bank itself, you have so many relationships, right? And you log into the bank website. Sometimes there are separate IDs for each of these, or sometimes there is one ID for all of these. All of us at our levels understand that we need to keep safe our passwords, not reveal to all of them. So there is a sense of security also involved there, but that's your identity in the bank. If you look at healthcare, uh, you go to large corporate hospitals, you are given a medical number, MRN number, right, or a patient number, and that becomes sort of your identity in the hospital world. They also take your phone number to be able to book appointments. They also take your email address to be able to send you reports and diagnostics and all of that. Entertainment is big, with the digital television and Android TVs and everything coming up. You have to now, subscribe to those apps and make payments. Your identity is there as well. When you fly on an airline, you book tickets through an app or on the website. You give your phone numbers, your age, gender, where are you traveling from here to there. There's a lot that these organizations now know about you, right? That there's a lot of participants here from the academia and education also. In some sense, your identity is there with your college. You fill so many application forms, whether it is PU or higher education or your undergrad or grad. You are providing a lot of information, which essentially is your identity, which is going into the target organization. E-commerce, very relevant in pandemic days. You don't want to go out, and you register on Amazon, Big Basket, Flipkart, Myntra, Jabong, whatever, right? And in a lot of these cases, for example, travel or e-commerce or banking for that matter, they know your credit card, debit card information as well, because you are using that to transact. Telecom, again, the same scenario. You register for a new phone, prepaid, postpaid, you give your Aadhaar IDs and a lot of other information. What calls you're making from one place to another. Telecom company knows about you. Social media, big hit, right? All of us are there somewhere, some form, whether on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or something else. And there, it's not financial information per se, but then there is your photographs over there. There's your relationships with friends, your brothers, sisters, spouse, parents, all that is out on social media. And now, if you look at the remaining two circles, enterprise and business, that's interesting, right? These two entities have to handle all these identities. Banking also in right. So if you look at it, identity management has two facets. One is a consumer facet, which I just spoke. As an user of a website, as an user of a bank, as an user of Amazon, or a user of Airtel phone number, or user of Facebook, or user of entertainment gaming website, or a Sony PlayStation, or some Xbox 360. You are a consumer, right? Now you are giving your information, but the business or the enterprise running that service has to manage that information. And we will talk about both of these facets today. So this is something where in a digital world, your identity is there everywhere. And we will, on the next slide, about what comprises of your identity. And right now, you just think that my user ID and my password is my identity. Yes, that's one part of the identity, right? But there is more to it. Now, how do you get into all of these websites, or when you do a transaction, what do you do, right? You could be an employee of an organization or a student of a college, so you log into their website, right? Now you do it using a handheld device. So your now identity goes on phone. Phone, for example, you can go and see list all the accounts that you have for your Gmail or Yahoo or Microsoft Outlook or any other service, right? Then wearables, you have these smart watches, you log into them, so your identity is stored in there. Cars are becoming smart, and now you have to log into a car as well, right? The smart auto concept and the cars that are, we think of a Tesla car. Obviously, the authentication happens there as well, so that the car recognizes the driver, right? There are smart printers where you have to log into those printers. There are several other things where you have to get in and provide your authentication in some ways, or prove that this is me. In the world of technology, when you look at administrations, and Ravi, maybe if you want to use laser pointer and point to these items, right? Privileged account. Privileged accounts are, you have administrative accounts on these software or on these websites. There are robotic process automation bots, which is going into a bit of technology, but then they have their own identities. Now, look at it this way. As a human, you were identity, you are identity, you will continue to remain identity. But now your watch has become an identity. Your car itself has its identity. Your phone has its identity by its number, right? The surveillance cameras which are out there on the buildings, probably they have their identity. The printer has its identity. So it's not just about humans having identities. A physical device, a non-living device, an electronic device which responds and is active also has identity. So it is a vast spectrum, and these identities today are responsible for all the data exchange that happens over the internet, right? Someone is initiating, someone is receiving and responding. Coming back to what is identity, or what comprises of identity, right? Yes, your user ID is a part of your identity, but it's a credential. So we will come to it, but your first name, last name, a unique identifier, for example, your Aadhaar number, your PAN number, that's your identity. Because if I combine, or if I just give Aadhaar number, the UIDAI is able to recognize that Aadhaar number, who is this individual, and figure out other things about it, right? So that is something which can uniquely identify you. A combination of your first name, last name, and date of birth, probably in a smaller population, let's say in your college or in your office, might probably uniquely identify you, right? So that's also a part of your identity. And when I talk identity, please perceive it as digital identity. So finding someone digitally and identifying them uniquely, probably that combination will be your identity. Now, the next concept to it is, what do you know which will help you prove your identity? So that is the credential, right? Something you know. You know your user ID, you know your password. But then user ID can be known to other people as well, because some a lot of websites we sign up as email address as our user ID. So something you know with a combination of a keyword which only you know becomes your credential, right? Something you have. Credit cards these days have a chip embedded on it, right? Which serves as a authentication means when you put it into that point of sale machine. So something you have. You might have also seen multi-factor authentication tokens, which is something which you have, which can generate a number, right? Something you have, a OTP which you receive, you get that OTP, you know that, and you have it, you give it. That becomes a part of your credential. And something you are. When all of you signed for your Aadhaar IDs, you gave your thumbprint. That is something you are, right? Your iris scan, the eye scan was done. So that is a credential which can authenticate you successfully and prove that this is that you are that identity, or you can claim that identity in some sense. So a digital identity is a unique identifier plus something which you know you have, or something that you are, which will help you uh, clearly claim that I am that user, or I am this identity, I am this first name, last name, or I am this user ID. In context of business, and I see some questions are coming, we will certainly answer them. Right. In context of business, if you look at it, when an employee or a contractor or a vendor, the green icon that you see on the right, when these individuals get into an organization, right, they have a job duty to do. They have their function roles. So a teller in a bank must be able to receive cash and dispense cash up to certain limits. Beyond that, he has to go to his manager or someone else to get that transaction approved, right? So there is a functional role that you have. You are part of a business unit, right? Taking example of a college, you are part of computer science department, or you are part of mechanical or ECE or some other. So you are part of a business unit in some sense. Or in a bank, you are part of loans, or you're part of credit cards or savings account, right? So the employee is working in that business unit. Office location again becomes important, that which branch is the person working in that bank, right? Who's your manager and supervisor? Manager, supervisor, a very important concept in digital identity, because these are the users who will approve or claim that, yeah, this is the user. That when you are going to, in context of a college, right, your lecturer or your principal signs something and authorizes that this individual can go and take some ticket, train rebate, right? Train ticket rebate. So that's kind of again a form of something that is attached to your identity. These are the attributes that is identity. Now, when you log into these applications, how do these applications behave with respect to identity? Each application has your profile. And what is that profile? Your job or function role. Where are you? Are you a consumer? If you are a consumer from perspective of a telecom company, for example, you are a consumer in Karnataka circle of or a telecom vendor. Now, be it Airtel, Vodafone, or BSNL or something else, right? Under that, do you have a prepaid or a postpaid card? That's probably your role, that this is a prepaid user or this is a postpaid user. Manager, supervisor probably doesn't make sense in this case, right? So what can you do within an Airtel application, or what can you do within a banking application, right? You can only see your balance levels. You can only see your credit card transactions. You can only see your loan amounts. So what that means is there are permissions set against your account in that software or in that application, in that website. Now we are talking of website, there could be internal software as well within the organization which have those permission levels defined. And then this essentially builds up the concept of access control, that when you are accessing something in an application, then you have access control items. It's a bit technical term, maybe too early in the presentation, but this is how identity is completely defined, that I have something which I can disclose to others, maybe my email address, my first and last name. I have something which only is unique to me, my password, or my iris scan, my fingerprint, or that credit card chip that I have. How does the website recognize me in terms of what can I do, and then this permission level and access control item. So that is the whole concept of digitally how you get into an application and how the application sees you together. We will move to the next one. Now, we spoke at length about credentials, and we spoke about access control and all that. But if you want to visualize it, right, this chart puts it right way. So on the left side, there are identities which are human systems, which are humans or systems or devices or things, right? And then these identities can be verified or proved by an proofing agency. So the MMYY thing that you see in between, which has a thumbprint icon somewhere, right? So someone can assert that this is that identity. It can prove that this is that identity, right? So it could be a government agency, it could be a private agency. So when you talk of Aadhaar, right, that thumbprint signal probably is a right representation of it. When you sign up at again, I will give example of taking a new phone connection or a SIM card. You give your Aadhaar number to Reliance Jio representative, and OTP comes to you. Give that, right? He has proved your identity through a credential exchange mechanism, right? Similarly, your driving license is your the regional travel authority is again a proofing agency. CRISIL, if you know, as an agency which can give you financial credit score, right? So that is again a proofing agency in some sense, but not from a digital identity perspective, but from a financial identity perspective. So the same thing is done for devices also. How does the Apple server recognize that this iPhone is the correct one, right? You have made an Apple ID on it, then their phone has a IMEI number, and through this proofing mechanism, ultimately it is proven that this digital device or this user as a human being is what he claims, right? So the who are you part is matched in this mechanism. And essentially what happens with this credential exchange and proofing is that a trust is established between the subject and the object, that I am trying to access this website, you provide credential, and now I am trusting you, right? It's like you go to the college, you show your I-card to the guard and he lets you in, right? So a trust is established by showing your card that this individual is correct or is appropriate or can access the college premises. In similar ways, we will talk of further concepts. We will talk about organizations can talk about each other's identity, trust, and federation thing. Now, further to it, what can you access, right? If you come to the right of this chart, you see all those familiar icons, Twitter, Google Plus, Facebook, right? You have enrolled in Google. Now, plenty of times you see when you go to another website, there is a Google authentication there. How does that work, right? Google and the website that you are currently working on, they have tied up together, and the website says that I will trust any identity which has come verified from Google, right? So there is a federation that has been established between these two organizations. So Google is the identity provider, and you can log in on the other service provider website using Google and access its services. Same thing, you see Facebook login on multiple other websites. So this is called the concept of federation, where two organizations can trust each other. One becomes an identity provider, so it provides a trusted identity, and the consumer or the service provider offering the website to you is called the service provider. They are able to render that service to you. Technically, there are technologies involved in it. There is something called as secure assertion markup language. We don't have time to get into technology here, but it involves exchange of tokens in your URLs. You are sometimes able to see long strings, and those tokens are exchanged as assertions. Before that can happen when configurations are done. Some cryptographic certificates are exchanged between Google and the website in offline, so that they can trust each other's users. Right. So apparently, when you have done all of that, you can access websites. An interesting piece is tying your digital identity to physical access, where you swipe a card and the gates open for you. Again, your identity is there registered. You have enrolled somewhere on your organization or on Google or Facebook or that organization, which then passes your identity to a physical card authorization mechanism or access scanner, right? So when you swipe your card there, your cryptographic token goes to the server there and says, yes, this guy is good to be entered, and the gates open for you. So essentially, you have to enroll in certain type of systems to be able to access those systems, after which every time when you go, you provide a credential in some form, and then you are authorized to access that resource. Let's roll on. So in terms of, let's look at it from a user's perspective, right? You have to be first onboard onto a system. So there is a process of registration. When you opened a new Gmail account, it asked you 15, 20 questions: who you are, what's your name, first name, last name, then gender, age. Some of that is optional, some of it is not optional. And then it asks you to suggest a user ID or an email address for you, which you can play around with it, or it can suggest from its own side to you. It will also ask you certain questions around what if credential, which is your password, right? So the typical questions like what is your mother's maiden name? Where were you born? What was the name of your school? When did you first buy your vehicle? What was the name of your first pet? Right. So while you onboarding, you are registering yourself and providing your identity information to the registrar. Right. Once you have done that, in some cases, proofing is required, which is number 2 on the right-hand side top. That you have to use your Aadhaar cards, driving license, or your tax ID or your PAN card to be able to prove that this user is the correct user. And this proofing essentially comes in a way when something of monetary value or something of significant value is being under consideration. Obviously, you don't prove yourself on Google, but you may have to prove yourself on a bank or a telecom organization, or when availing a government subsidy, or when registering to a government website, right? So the concept of proofing comes there. Then now you are enrolled on the system. So the system understands who you are, your identity is there. There is also a credential which has been in some form stored for you. It could be the password you generated, it could be your iris scan, your fingerprint, or electronic card which was granted to you. There is also the concept of OTP here, where when you enroll, you are sent a OTP on your phone number, so that your phone number becomes your proofing mechanism in some sense, that this user is not a fake user. When it comes to runtime, when you actually log in, then the authentication happens, right? So all the future transactions after onboarding proofing are something which come into the category of, first you have to authenticate, prove yourself that I claim the username which I have entered, which could be through a password. And then through a second layer, which is called the multi-factor authentication, you could use that and prove yourself that I am this user indeed. Multi-factor authentication really is handy in cases, and it saves you that even if you lose your password, or someone does shoulder surfing and reads, or someone your password, because of multi-factor authentication, the OTP that comes to you, the other individual is not able to get in the system. So you have two set of credentials, multi-factor. Two factors are there to authenticate you. Finally, when you log in, then you are granted access basis the that we spoke about earlier. What can you do in that website? You are able to transfer money to someone else, given the amount you have in your bank account, you are able to send messages to each other on Facebook, or you are able to post a new picture, you are able to go live on YouTube, right? So all that is done because you have been granted access to do so in that website. Then for enterprise users and even for consumer users comes the concept of governing this identity, right? So over the time, you have seen that some accounts are terminated because of misuse, or uh, Facebook often sends you a new screen when you log in saying our privacy settings have changed. You need to accept this. So all that comes under governance. When you look at it from a business perspective, when two organizations merge, right, one organization buys another, a lot of users from one organization have to be now enrolled into the other organization. So now how governance must happen? The concept of segregation of duties comes here. It is a very important concept in giving an example of banking, for example, right? Uh, an individual who makes a transaction to withdraw a lakh rupees, a clerk or a teller in the bank. So you have submitted a, a, a withdrawal form to the teller. Now he has to create a transaction in the bank from that this wants to withdraw a lakh rupees. He's the maker of that transaction. Now this transaction is then checked by his manager or his supervisor. So he becomes the checker. So maker and checker, if they become the same individual, there is a chance of fraud. If someone has a malified intent, the maker himself can withdraw money from the bank account of another account holder. So governance comes into play there. Segregation of duties. Duties must be segregated in such a way that fraud cannot be done and responsibilities are unitarily assigned. All not all, but a lot of hack news that you hear, right? That a hacker entered into a website and able to take away credentials. Uh, are all those crimes related to loss of identity in some sense? When you see a news of embezzlement of funds were moved from here to there, that essentially doesn't come as a hacking news, but it comes as a fraud news. That essentially is a problem of identity governance, that your roles were not assigned properly, who could do what. And that's why this governance failed and money was withdrawn or funds were embezzled. It could be at an identity level, it could be at a business or a transaction level, but essentially governance failed. Revoke access is important. I don't know if people ever go and say that I'm going away from Facebook, I'm closing my account, but that option is available. But in terms of an organization, people, employees join, employees leave, and people who leave, their access must be revoked. When should it be revoked? The last working day, the hour when the person is out of the organization at 5 p.m. Right? There are also cases of revoke where you have to term and the access must be revoked then and there. So the immediate revoke access point also comes there. So essentially, it's a life cycle. We call it digital identity life cycle management. So you onboard, proof, verify, grant access, and govern. This 3, 4, 5 continues till the access is revoked. Once you are gone, again, onboarding has to happen to come into the same cycle. Let's move. Now, as a consumer, and Ravi will talk about enterprise of the enterprise part of the identity, that how a business handles identity. As a consumer, I'm just concluding here. We will take these, we will answer these questions if you have these at the end of the presentation as well. But when you are signing up for a website, right, you should be conscious of how my data would be stored and transmitted, right? And that data is the identity profile I spoke about in the beginning. So your username, password, first name, last name, your location, date of birth, parents' names, all that is part of your identity, right? Should be conscious about how is that service provider, whether it is email service provider or bank service provider or airline service provider, how are they storing my data? Is it stored encrypted? Because if it is not stored encrypted, anyone who can log into that database can see it, right? Is it transmitted encrypted? So HTTPS, what you see in URLs, is very important. credential shared, the example that I gave you of you using Google credential or Google email address and password to log into another website, that's essentially, it's not credential sharing, it's federation, but in some way Google is asserting your identity. So how is that happening? Is it secure enough or not, right? How do I protect my profile attributes? Question yourself, why does this website need my date of birth? Is it necessary, right? Is it so any data that you give to any website, ask that question, why is the website asking me this question? If any is asking you Aadhaar number, you certainly won't give because you're sensitive about it, but please be sensitive about other information also which you give, your mother's name, your father's name, your date of birth, because these are the questions which a banker would ask you to ascertain your identity over a phone line, right? And that data could be misused. What are you providing? We just gave examples of, right? Now, what data are you providing is not just what you type in forms. It is also about what you are searching on Google, because Google stores that search history forever. When you use Google Maps and move around, last 10 years you have been using Google Maps, and Google Maps exactly knows where you have been, how many countries, how many cities, how many places. And because you are at a specific place in the night, it also knows where is your home. It also knows where is your office or where is your college, because during the day you are there, right? It also knows what route you take. And by virtue of your speed on the GPS, it also knows whether you drive or you cycle or you walk, right? So data is not about what you are providing directly in a form. It is also about what you are providing intrinsically through your actions. So be conscious when your GPS is on, when your GPS is not, right? What ultimately happens is, someone please go on mute. What essentially happens is all this data directly or indirectly that you are providing gets correlated and profiled. And that's why when you search something on Amazon, the same item pops up as an ad in another website on Facebook, because the service providers are smart enough. They use the Web2 framework, correlate all of these, and it has gone to a level where today, if you are searching for maternity clothing, it knows that a baby is expected. After a few months, you will start getting advertisements of diapers. So they that you visited a doctor because you signed up there using your Google ID, probably on that hospital website. You went to a pharmacy, and there you used Google website, Google login online, and you bought certain medication. They know what it was. So the technology is smart enough to be able to figure out what's happening in your life. Right? So be conscious of what data you are providing. How is your privacy being protected online? And when we talk about privacy, it is about not just your name and password. It's about your health information. It's about your finance information. It's about who you are in some sense, right? Consider that multi-factor. The OTP factor is available when you are logging in, or some other factor is available by which no one can log in on your behalf. So with that, I conclude the consumer part of the presentation. There are some questions. I will go through those questions while Ravi is presenting, and then we will cover those questions in the Q&A session at the end. Ravi, over to you.
Thank you, Pankaj.
Yes, you are.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ravi. Thanks.
And I think that definitely must have helped us to build enough ground on what digital identities are and how they're managed. And we looked at primarily from a consumer perspective, what does it mean for somebody to have an identity and the act of that. Now let's shift a little bit. Now let's look at what organizations have to do about IAM and identity and access management. So when it comes to organizations, protecting their assets, protecting their information assets, data, and identities of the employees and any and each and every identity that interacts with an organization is also equally important. So organizations now have taken up steps to implement certain measures and certain solutions. Access and to make sure that access is provided to those enterprise resources which the users are entitled to, and only to that access that access which is allowed to perform their jobs. Yeah. So this is another way. We just looked at a SOD example, which talks about segregation of duties and protecting or managing that access in such a way that maker checker control is available there. So ultimately, what identity and access management from organization perspective is all about controls, and those controls are primarily access control. So I have put to build some context. NIST, which is a body which defines cybersecurity framework for organizations to implement, it also calls out identity and access management as a control. And what you see on the right hand side is the protect part of it, which really articulates how organizations can protect their assets and information, which is basically access control. And that is the control which defines what measures organizations have to take in order to implement or protect information and assets. Some more, what does it mean for organizations? We also need to look at what are the modern trends and what are the business drivers for organizations now, by virtue of which organizations are implementing these kind of solutions and they're looking to invest into these kind of solutions. So there is need to manage risks, which we get typically from a data breaches or insider attacks and malwares. So organizations have to be on top of the game in order to make sure that enough controls are implemented to mitigate cyber risks. IT complexity and efficiency is also becoming a factor where while there is investments happen from organizations perspective, it also have to be in such a way that those are giving enough returns on investments. IT complexity is also increasing in the form of different kind of assets are coming in the enterprise. Digital assets are also there. Applications are growing by the day, and this is basically adding to a complexity where when it comes to correlating all these things together from an organization perspective, it just adds a lot of complexity and which actually then results into inefficiencies in operations and administrations. Regulatory compliance is an important aspect from any organization perspective. If we have put it in a context, segregation is also a control that is required by certain compliance measures, for example, ITGC or IT general controls. Is coming or making waves because it really makes sure that your identity or your information is privacy is maintained, and that is not shared across applications in an authorized manner. HIPAA is a healthcare kind of control where healthcare organizations or pharmaceuticals and life sciences organizations, they want to make sure that their information is protected. So there are various regulations for which organizations have to comply with. And we will see how IDAM or Identity and Access Management helps with that. User experience. We talked about users onboarding into an organization. Imagine that you are getting to an organization on a first day and you don't get your laptop to do your job, right? That's the kind of productivity issue which will delay your getting productive in an organization. So in order to do that, you should be provided with ability to access the system and request access for yourself to all the applications that you need access to perform your jobs. So all that also is adding to a trend or need that is where IDAM makes sense. Digital transformation, something relating to all these digital assets that we are now looking into, mobiles and cloud technologies, social media. So with all this, there's a growing need of having end users access to as much as digital assets in order to perform their duties or perform their jobs and be productive in an organization. Look at this COVID scenario, which has, there's not a better example where somebody or people like us who have turned into web kind of mechanisms or virtual mechanisms in order to interact with people, interact with our friends and families, and perform our jobs as well. So these are increased, and basically this is the modern landscape that we now have to look at in order to see how this is to organization. How does organizations again? So let's look at how IDAM helps basically mitigating all this. We talked about some of these factors. For example, regulatory compliance, right? There are controls which demand that users' access needs to be protected in an appropriate manner. It has to be approved, it has to be governed, it has to be revoked in a timely manner. So these controls are defined in these regulations in the form of access control. We looked at NIST guideline, which says access control is basically a mechanism to address that. Operational efficiency. We looked at an example where somebody does not have access to perform his job on a day one. It's going to be a administration overhead as well, where he has to reach out, raise a help desk ticket and ask for that access. And somebody has to create that access for himself. If the same would have been performed by the user himself, and it happens time manner, it shows or it saves a lot of time, and that way organizations can implement operational efficiency. Cyber improvement, these controls, we are looking at managing or mitigating the risks which is generated out of these kind of threats. For example, the fraud example that we talked about, where if maker checker kind of control is not implemented, actually can result into fraud. It cannot, if somebody's access is not revoked on a timely basis, it can result into unauthorized access to that particular information, even if the user is not associated with the organization. So these kind of things relate to cyber risk management and where identity and access management can help. Interoperability, which actually is a facet from an organization where we talked about correlating applications and the information that is shared across these platforms or information mechanisms. So basically, sharing this information just becomes very easy when identity and access management works as a shared platform and fits right into the core of the architecture that enterprises look at from an information systems perspective. Move on. So now let's look at what are these core identity and access management processes and technologies. Some of these we discussed or touched upon. Let's look at them individually. We talked about onboarding and granting access. So basically, user administration and provisioning is the first thing that we look at from onboarding users or digital identities into the organization, and then providing them access that is related to perform their job duties. Now, this is performed using mechanisms which are called as authoritative sources, where, for example, your record is first created into a HR system, and then it gets into an identity and access management platform. So this kind of sets the tone going forward that an identity is already created for the user in enterprise. The relationship starts, and then the provision for that user based on his user type or the job that he has to perform, user type or employee type, or based on the business unit that he belongs to. Access management comes next, to where now this end user is part of certain applications to perform his job duties. And so a basic minimum control is that you have to perform authentication, where you want to make sure that the person that is accessing that particular application or system is a genuine user, and he has the right amount of privileges to perform that particular access in that particular application. So we make sure that access and identity is all verified. So who are you and what you have is both ways verified. We covered identity proofing part of it, credential management, strong authentication. We talked about OTP, one-time password, which is basically a step-up kind of mechanism to make sure that what you're performing is a sensitive kind of transaction, and it has to be even more validated that you are the one who are authorized for it. Digital and is kind of a trend that we can say that it is coming into this, but now in this trend, in this particular modern era, it is becoming a core service where mobiles and digital assets are all trying to access certain applications and enterprise platforms. So you as an end user or an employee have your own PDA assigned to you, and using that PDA, you are trying to access an enterprise application. So there also we need to make sure that the mobile identity that you have also needs to be ensured and validated with the access that it has got. Federated, Pankaj mentioned one example about enterprises establishing trust. This is a concept where enterprises want to make sure that the employees or the relations that are established that also enables these identities to work with their partners, associated firms or partnering organizations to access those applications seamlessly. So let's say you are enterprise user from an organization and you are trying to book your tickets with a partner's airline, for example, Yatra or Make My Trip. And with that, you don't expect to perform your authentication again, because you are expecting that basically, sorry, make sure that you are seamlessly accessing that particular platform to be able to perform. So this is where the trust comes in picture, where your organization is establishing a trust with the partnering organization to enable your access to that particular application or system to be able to seamlessly perform your job. Single sign-on, will hear this term many a times when you are dealing with online transactions. Partnering organizations, another example where single sign-on helps make sure that you are reducing the number of passwords that you are using. And let's say you start to access number of applications using timesheet or a partnering organization, you're accessing your finance to check your balance sheet or payment pay slip. You all want to make sure that once you're logged in on a day one, you come in the morning and all that access is available to you. So there is a mechanism that happens or in between to make sure that you have the access that is needed and your identity or access is managed in such a way that you get that access seamlessly. Also helps you prevent malicious use of passwords and losing your passwords. Identity governance is we talked about segregation of duties, and that's the right place or concept which articulates that, where you want to make sure that the access that is provided to your end users is governed on a timely basis, right? Let's say you have a contractor in the organization who's only there for a certain period of a contract. You want to make sure that that contract, once expires, the person also loses his access, because otherwise it will become a threat to your organization. So that organization can perform identity governance, kind of implement these controls to make sure that that access is reviewed. Privileged management, this interesting concept. We know that there are identities, and we saw some of the examples. And one of the example was that administrators are such identities which have certain elevated privileges compared to a normal end user, right? An administrator, let's say a Windows system administrator. I hope you all are aware of Windows system administrator. What he does, he has access to creating users' accounts into the system. He has access to either install applications on your laptop or your system. So that happens only because the person has got elevated privileges. And there is a different set of threat that is associated with elevated privileges. And it has to be also managed in an enterprise to make sure that those elevated privileges or privileged access cannot be exploited. If it is exploited, obviously there is a larger access that user has got, and then there is a possible threat to information or make unauthorized ad particular system, unauthorized ad. Let's so these are some of the core processes. Let's look at some of the trends. Now, you will see many of themes appearing over here, but I would like to call out certain things. For example, you see on the bottom, at the bottom, which is identity in or for cloud or emerging areas. For example, DevSecOps, RPA or IoT technologies or integrations. RPA bots, which are automated agents, you can say. These are actually performing certain repeated operations that humans used to perform, but now process has been implemented in such a way that those bots are performing those operations because they are just repetitive in action. So people don't want to burn their energy into having a human particularly doing that. So you can see that there are threats that are available. If enough privileges are not provided to that bot, it cannot perform that particular action. But at the same time, if there are machine learning and cognitive kind of technologies are supplemented to that bot, it can learn over time and perform actions, which we will see evolving in the next years to come. And it even then becomes very important to manage the access that these kind of digital assets are also having. Consumer mobile and social identity. Consumers is the era right now. We are looking at online shopping and all the virtual access that we are now doing in this special scenario, but it just has been there for quite some time. Now, consumers need, if I'm an Amazon user, I would like to make sure that I am able to seamlessly access whatever I need on the Amazon platform, right? So I don't need somebody to give me an access that I need. I should be able to register myself. I should be able to get all the access that I need. So it also makes sure that there is enablement from a consumer perspective. You want to make sure that your consumer comes to you often, and then that is how you are able to sell your products. So if you are able to empower your consumers to perform that job through that platform, they will come back to that particular platform time and again. In order to make sure that you have to manage that life cycle in such a way that there is enough processes that are established to be able to give users that empowerment. So I hope that makes sense and relates to something that we just talked about. Let's move on in the interest of time. So I want to present to you something important now. Let's relate all these things that we talked about with users and things. And when we say things, these are basically your wearables, digital interfaces, RPA bots, etc. Those are actually interacting with your, they need access to perform something, right? So enterprise users things or must enterprise resources, applications, platform, physical assets, databases, etc. But they need digital identities to now perform or access particular resources. But all that should happen on a secure manner. So that's where that particular layer comes in, which we call as access control or access management. So this kind of ties everything together from a component perspective, that when we look at it as a solution, it actually tells you a story that all these play in harmony in order to make sure that that system allows managing those digital identities and assets or access effectively. Interesting thing, I think our audience is also enterprise users or professionals. This when we talk about such solution, these are implemented in a manner where they touch upon various aspects of your enterprise, and these kind of solutions cannot be just implemented haphazard manner. They have to be planned, they have to be designed properly, they have to be strategized properly, and then rolled out properly for the users in order to make that impact. So typically we have seen from our experience where organizations many a time to make sure that they have a strategy in place in implementing such applications or such solutions. So typically we work, organizations in order to put together a strategy and roadmap where we kind of paint a picture to the organization that this is how you will see it evolving. But in order to get there, we need to understand pain points. We need to understand, what you have today, what we need to put in place in order to address all those pain points. So, roadmap is kind of an example where IAM also is a start for an organization which probably cannot put together a vision in order to implement such kind of a solution. Now let's say somebody has to implement that. How do we go about implementing it? We follow, or there is a cycle that can be followed in an iterative manner. Many times we are hearing these terms of agile approach where people want to make sure that everything happens or keep evolving. So there is a mechanism that is available, or a process can be put in place. Everything can happen in a iterative through phases. And at the end of it, when you implement this kind of solution, there is a support that is provided, or there is enough workforce in place in order to maintain this kind of a solution. Because your requirements will be evolving, and there will be enhancements or controls that you will need to add to this solution. So keep enhancing the solution. So in all the all core basically is how do you manage this kind of a solution? How do you manage this kind of an implementation? And what is the organizational impact that it is going to have? Because it's going to be an organizational change. It is going to be a process change. It's going to be from an infrastructure perspective or IT perspective, it's also going to be a change. So all that has to be articulated properly from an organization perspective to its end users. And then culturally, it has to fit in the organizations. There is a requirement to manage that properly. We are towards the end of the presentation. I wanted to show you some of the leading products that are in the market. Identity and access management is a solution which heavily depends on commercial tools, because commercial tools or organizations have invested their time and energy into understanding these requirements, understanding these needs from a process and technology perspective. And they have already put together solutions which are not only able to implement solutions, but at the same time touch upon or address those drivers that we talked about: cyber risk, regulatory compliance, end user efficiency. All those things are kind of covered into each and every of these tools, right? So there are the logos that you see on the screen here. They are different organizations which present different tools, and you can, free to Google that as well. You will find one of your information. But for example, let's say CyberArk. CyberArk is a privileged access management kind of solution. We touched upon administrators having access to perform privileged activities. So that is the tool which allows you managing that particular facet of identity and access management. Okta, you must have heard this word. Okta is a single sign-on and federation platform which enables your digital access and digital relationship with a particular organization to access that application. So it enables single sign-on, multi-factor, all those things are enabled by Okta. And there are some parallel organizations which are also there, SailPoint and ForgeRock. So they bring similar kind of solutions. Moving on, interesting for some of our audience, which is part of the webinar today. What are the careers, or how to become an IAM professional? We many times look at news articles where there are requirements that are published that we need a identity and access management developer or identity and access management architect. What do these mean? These are the which are evolved over time, and as organizations are investing into this particular platform or solution, they become part of that particular organization. So keep watching for these. You will come across these names often. and these and what does it really what does it require to get to those or get those careers built in. So there are certain skills that are involved, either such as programming or process definition, IT and network architecture, and of course project management and program management. And not to forget, identity and access management, product implementation skills are core to this, because if you don't understand what a product allows or can be configured, it cannot be implemented properly to address the needs that an organization has. So you can take a note of these and ponder on these if you want to really pursue this as a career. There's certainly there's a lot that you can expect from the market where these kind of careers can be built in. Pankaj and I am our full-time professionals in identity and access management, and this is all coming from our experience. So I think this brings us to an end of the presentation. My apologies if I have to run last few slides, but thanks all for listening patiently, and we are happy to take questions.
So Ravi, what I've done is I've put the questions in a Word document. If you stop sharing, I'll share that document and we can go question by question.
Sure.
Okay, so the questions should be on the screen. We will go through in that sequence because that's how they came and they will also relate together. So how can we make make safe our password by using different websites and different free apps, etc. The thumb rule should be do not replicate the same password across multiple websites. Try to keep passwords separate and extremely separate for things which manage money, which is of value to you, right? So banking passwords must be much more stronger. And in those cases, don't just rely on a password, but rely on a second factor like a OTP related mechanism if the service provider supports it. Try to separate your browsers. You can also use incognito mode in some of those browsers. If you don't know that, Google it, you'll figure it out. You can all see that you can use different browsers like Chrome, Firefox, and Internet Explorer for different purposes if you want to do so, right? Then there was a comment around by using API. I think this was related to how websites trust each other's users. So that essentially happens using generally a technology called Secure Assertion Markup Language, SAML, where in the configuration, encryption certificates are exchanged, and then a token is generated for each user authentication. The token is sent to the other side, the service provider website, and it decrypts the token and trusts that user. So it's not an API. It's essentially a SAML exchange mechanism. If you search the word SAML, the current version is 2.0, you will be able to figure that out. Okay, am I back? Am I back? Am I audible?
We can hear you.
Yeah,
Yes. Okay.
We can hear you.
Sure. The next question was, what is the use of cookies for customers, for websites and products, etc.? Multiple things. Someone was saying something?
Hello, Pankaj, go ahead.
Okay. So use of cookies essentially is to store some information. So a lot of it, when you are searching something on Flipkart, right, that thing gets stored in cookies, and then that cookie, if it is website cookie, that same information can be read by another website, and that's how you see those ads. There are also cookies used for GDPR compliance, and we will come to a GDPR question which is there at the bottom. But essentially what that regulation says, it's a European regulation primarily, being caught up by other countries also. What that law regulation says is that you must tell the user that I'm collecting your information, right? And so a pop-up comes there that, and you have to accept it or you can to ignore. So cookies are small web elements. You can see cookies which are there on your browser. A safe way to browse is that after each use that you do, like if you have used Amazon or Flipkart or something, clear the cookies and then do your banking uh, related. If you're done banking, then clear the cookies, again go to something else. It is too tedious, but if you're paranoid about security, you might want to try that out. Right. Next question, how can I make safe use of Google Maps? Well, someone suggests uh, go anonymous. Yes, certainly you can, but technology is smart enough to track you by your phone ID, IMEI number, etc. So they will track you somehow. Uh, Good thing is only when you want it, use it, right? So, and that's not just about Google Maps, right? Any information you give to anyone, just ask that question: Is does the other person need that information, and for what purpose? How can it be used, right? You are giving Google Maps your location; it's indirectly given it, but you also need to think about other sites as well, right? There are other map solutions like OpenStreetMaps, etc., which uh, give you experience not as good as Google, but they will be able to navigate you from one place to another. How to avoid cookies? Certainly very difficult. Use incognito mode that we spoke about earlier. Then there is a question around can anyone of you explain how GDPR rules are different than similar rules which are pre-existing in other countries? Uh, as it says, it's global data privacy regulation, right? It insists that one is the information, private information or privacy information, username, password, date of birth, financial information or health related information, if it is collected, it must be secured. It must only be collected if there is a use for it first. Second, if the user says so, you must delete the information. If the user wants, you must tell how many times that information was used in access, right? And then at an enterprise level, there is a concept of controllers and processors in GDPR. The difference between US, India, etc., most stringent rules are there in Europe. US has a different connotation to it, but they are certainly similar. In India, we are not so GDPR savvy in some sense, but our India Data Protection Bill is yet to be tabled in the parliament, and that will talk about data protection at a higher level. GDPR mostly focuses on privacy. Question two was India is pushing for similar set of rules that the corporations such as Google, Microsoft, Facebook already have GDPR. Are those similar or different? Well, what happens is when an enterprise tries to put its privacy rules for its website, those are in some way framed around their own meaningful use and purpose, as in Facebook is able to use that data and analyze it. So the rules will be written in a specific way. What this regulation is doing is it is bringing all of them to the same page, right? So um, and Facebook, Microsoft, Google, they got in GDPR because those countries pushed them to do so. And there have been numerous incidents where privacy data leaks have happened with multiple organizations. And GDPR coming in, what happens is all the organizations who collect private information are bound to protect it. And if not, then they have significant penalties, which are monetary in nature, to be paid. Question on can you please throw a light on SOX critical application? So Sarbanes-Oxley is SOX, and SOX critical, what SOX says is that the financial statements which are generated for an organization, when I say financial statements, the audit reports in some sense, and especially organizations which have private equity, as in who have stock money, right? Who are listed on stock exchange, whether in India, NSE, BSE, or SEC, or the stock exchange in the US. For those organizations, it is important that the financial information generated is properly audited by external financial auditor, and the auditor has to attest it or affirm that information. Now, any software which is used to prepare these audit statements, these financial statements, becomes a SOX critical application. And from an identity perspective, it is very important that access to these critical SOX critical applications are managed properly. So that's the context of SOC in identity management.
Sir, I have a couple of questions. Can I ask?
Let me please finish this, and then we can go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
Quick one, database password should be encrypted or can be stored in hardware security. It depends on where the use is. What are you storing the database, right? If you are storing extremely secret formula for your cold drink, you might probably want to put it in a hardware security module. Now, if you are just protecting maybe some less secret information in that sense, you might want to put it just by encryption. Another question was to encrypt data. A number of algorithm names were suggested, right? And we went to the strongest one as well. But the premise of encryption is you have to understand what are you trying to achieve through that encryption, right? Encryption gives you confidentiality, accountability, right? Now, if you are sending data from one person to another, then you probably, you want to encrypt that data with your private key and be able to decrypt it, right? So you will have to use asymmetric encryption. If you are looking at HTTPS as a protocol, the RSA algorithm was here. The RSA algorithm is used there, but by using that, first a key comes to you, random generated, and then symmetric encryption is used. So what are you trying to achieve? If you are trying to achieve non-repudiation, then encryption has to be used in a different way. And again, when to encrypt, when not to encrypt, because encryption is a burden on the processing or computer, right? So when do you want to encrypt is also necessary. So there are plenty of algorithms there. I think the judgment will be basis what you are trying to encrypt and what is the purpose of the encryption. Identity management systems. What about Amazon Web Services? Yes, there are plenty of other IAM systems. We didn't list them on that slide. Amazon does have its own solution, and which is very centric to Amazon applications. The logos that we showed there typically are enterprise class applications, which can create, manage users in a lot of other applications beyond just web applications. Someone had a question. Please go ahead.
Yes, sir. Amazon and of amount whatever they are posted. So why Amazon will give out my data to other, it could be Facebook or any other or hello?
Okay. So the question is, if you don't find a product of your choice on one website, the other website starts popping up. Why does one website leak my data to other? Is that the question? Okay. If you would have read the fine print of the terms of agreement when you signed up for that website, Amazon, Flipkart, or whatever, you said that in there, right? Now, the other piece to it is the cookies, the devil we have been talking about for a while on this presentation, right? So there are multiple ways in this information gets shared from one website to another. Some of it is cookies on your website. Some of it is the terms and conditions that you agreed to while signing up. I know you don't have a choice, so we all live with it.
Okay. And one more. To do this IAM course, is there any certification course on this?
The academia is gearing up to information security and cyber security. I don't think there is a specific identity and access management course in the college, but I'm sure they do have cyber security and information security courses. if you are looking for a specific IAM course, you might want to, first try it with, the products that we listed on that page, but they will be very product specific courses. Right now, if you do a specialization in information security, probably it will get covered there.
Okay. Actually, I'm working as a professor in the college. I project for take up in this field.
Sure, ma'am. We can work through Karthik and ma'am, so we can figure that out. Not a problem at all. I will just focus on the questions for now. I appreciate that we will certainly work on the process. There are other questions around.
Can I ask one question?
I request everyone to please share your questions on the chat window. There are already a long list of questions on the chat window, which the speakers will be taking up. You can also share your questions there.
Okay.
Thank you, Shikha ma'am.
I'm trying to answer questions on chat as well. So yeah, parallelly. Thank you.
Okay. So there was a question around CISA and CSAM. Will CSAM merger both CISSP and CISA requirements, or is there a relevance of COVID-5 here? So for those who are not aware, CISSP, CISA, and CISM are professional certifications provided by ISC Square and ISACA respectively, which are kind of a credential of a person's knowledge in this field. Now, CISSP is more focused on broad information security, while CISA and CISM are focused on InfoSec audit. So they have two different purposes. If you are looking for a career in information security audit, you should look for CISA and CISM. If you are looking for a broader information security career, you should look for CISSP. COVID-5 is a broad framework on information security governance, right? Will certainly have relevance, especially in case of CISA and CISM, CISM. CISSP, while it will talk about governing frameworks in one of those domains, but CISA and CISM will focus a lot on COVID. What about open data governance? While it is not directly related to identity management, it is a subject of information security. And data governance is a separate topic. Me and Ravi both are not experts here, but what I can cover here is that it has to be looked at it from the perspective of what are you collecting, how are you processing structured data, unstructured data, data lakes. So I think the organizers probably can look at a separate session on data governance. What language skills is required to pursue career in IAM? You should first have a knack for programming, not always necessary. It is good to know JavaScript, Java. Sometimes the tools also use VB.NET. Those kind of, if you can read and understand code, probably you can get into identity management. It's not a area where you will be doing development all the time. Area where you will be applying your functional, as in the process, and technology and configuration skills together. So it's not just development in identity management. So if you can understand code, if you have done basic, C, C++ in your college, and you are good at picking up languages, it should be done. How GitHub knows that my GitHub password is also used on other websites by me? Sorry, Ravi, you want to take that? I'm not sure how GitHub works.
No, same here. I'm not aware of GitHub. Aware of GitHub as in GitHub is a platform from a source code, and you can create your own projects, and it's basically something to share on the web. But then I'm not specifically aware of how GitHub manages that.
Okay. Next question is IAM available ISC and UTM appliances? If you can elaborate what is ISC and UTM, please type it in the text box. I'll take up the question next. When we try to log into our Gmail, Amazon Prime account from a different device other than mobile, we get an alert. You logged in from a different device. Here, device also become identity here, right? Then how one identity? Okay. So what happens is when you log into Gmail, Amazon from a different device, get a mail. That is correct. And it is a security mechanism that these providers have built, that if someone steals your password, you get an alert and you should be able to reset your password immediately and let them know that it was not you. Now, yes, your browser there is an identity, not your laptop. So the technology has gone to level where unique IDs are generated for your browser instances, and then those get shared. So typically when you log in, that instance ID is shared, and Amazon and Google are able to know that you are logging in from the same browser. So this will happen even if you change browser. So today, if on Chrome, if you go to Internet Explorer, that alert will come, right? So it's a security mechanism built, and browser instance becomes your identity. It becomes the identity which is used in that case. And when you first time log in, this identity is stored by Google and Amazon. So that trust is created there, that this user ID logs in from this browser ID or browser instance. Many applications have very long terms and conditions. When we log in without reading it, will it be a problem? Well, in most cases, it will not be, but you may be violating some terms, or in some cases, the website might be telling that all the content that you upload becomes their copyright. So then if you are an artist, it's a problem, right? If the website says that any email that comes and you use through their mail, they have the right to read it and run analytics on it. If you don't care, it's not a problem. If you care, it's a problem. Right? So I understand it. It's not easy to read through those terms and conditions, but because of legal requirements, these websites put it. Skim through it. Most of us are not legal individuals, so we don't understand law. So it may not be possible for us to go entirely. So yes, there is constraint. I fully appreciate that. What kind of trouble you may get in? Just be a sincere citizen. Don't do something wrong. You probably will not get into a trouble. Okay. A couple of thank yous. Then how to deploy applications in Security Cloud IAM applications. Some applications, identity applications that we showed on the screen are cloud ready. So for example, Savient has that. SailPoint has a cloud ready application. Amazon Web Services has their own cloud. Google has IAM applications, right? So IBM has offered a cloud offering as well on the for identity management. So they are deployed in those clouds, and then you have to use virtual private circuit VPCs and peer-to networking to be able to access them. Ravi answered that question. What is the use of MFA in IAM? So multi-factor authentication we spoke about in beginning. This is essentially another factor, a OTP or a card or iris scan or thumbprint scan, so that your proofing is strong. Second, no one is able to masquerade over you or spoof your identity. So if you know user ID and probably are able to guess the password, you can log in using that person. But if you don't have the multi-factor authentication, second factor OTP, you will not be able to log in. So it protects your identity in that sense. Are cyber forensics courses? Certainly there are cyber forensics courses offered by multiple universities. The immediate one that comes to my mind is a university in Gujarat. If you search that, you should be able to get it. MFA, Ravi answered that question. Cookies question is a repeat. Okay. Language. Salami attacks is again a subject beyond me and Ravi. It's a vulnerability assessment penetration testing topic. Unfortunately, I can't cover it.
There is one question on using authentication for CentOS. I replied with the answer, but just wanted to elaborate on that. Any Unix or Linux system or any platform typically has multiple authentication mechanisms. You can try enabling the LDAP authentication mechanism, which typically allows you to connect to any Active Directory or your LDAP directory that you may have. So it can be explored, and if that CentOS supports it, I think that's the way to go.
Okay. One of the attendees have suggested that sharing of login through Google on Amazon and Flipkart shares that information. Possibly, yes. We don't know how that website has been set up, but yes, that will allow for exchange of what the user searched, and search histories can be shared by the two Amazon and Flipkart, for example. If they share, I know they don't, but yes, that it is possible that way.
There is one question on how to encrypt the data in such a way that database is compromised. People are not able to recover the passwords or the credentials. So if this question means from a administrator credential perspective or privileged access, typically the best solution for this is to use privileged access management solution. What it does is it stores credentials into a vault, which is encrypted in a highest level of encryption mechanism, AES and beyond. So that is the recommended mechanism if you're talking about any database privileged access.
All right. So we are running over time. If there are any other questions, you can mail to Shikha Madam or Karthik sir, and we may be able to get back to you for sure. We will make sure that we answer those queries to you. Karthik, Shikha, over to you.
Thanks a lot.